Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, Mark Adams and the Red Raiders able to stop the bleeding as they pick up a win in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It's part of the Big 12 SEC Challenge, and they have, all of about 5 to 10 minutes to enjoy that before turning to number 12 coming to their house as Iowa State heads to Lubbock. We're getting to that, and also this possibly being Big 12 schedule release Eve. Could it really happen? We're discussing it all next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to be back with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Always great to be your first listen each weekday on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And today's episode brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs, helping you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free with LinkedIn Jobs. Terms and conditions apply. Chris, great to see you again back in West Texas. And this time around, you're back with a win. The bleeding has stopped, at least momentarily, for Mark Adams and the Red Raiders as they do their part in the Big 12 SEC Challenge, taking down the Bayou Bengals of Louisiana State University. And I don't care what LSU had been doing prior, Chris. Texas Tech had only been doing a lot of losing. So, man, it feels good to talk about a win for a chance.
Yeah, I remember a week ago on this date, I felt like you had a chance to win both games last week, and, you know, it's half right. But yeah, man, your first win in 2023, just to kind of, yeah, and here we are at the end of January. Yeah, that's right. And it doesn't snap, you know, your conference, you know, losing streak or anything like that, but it does put a good taste in your mouth and gives you a little bit of confidence, I would think, is now you're about to get back to the grind. But yeah, and it was, I mean, if we're all being honest here, I'm sure none of us had a really great feeling when you see the way that West Virginia game ended, and then you see that Pop Isaacs goes down, and then you find out on Friday afternoon that, you know, Pop and Fardaws Amac would not be available and playing on Saturday versus LSU. But and again, LSU was struggling, and I think it's important to note that Vegas had you favored still by a couple 2.5 points. So LSU had really been struggling. I think it's also a tip of the cap in some ways to how good the Big 12 has been and is. But it's hard to win on the road, but period. I don't care where you go play or who you're going to play against. It's just hard to win on the road when it's a true road game. And LSU made a run at the, toward, latter part of the second half, but it just wasn't enough. And the Red Raiders squeezed about everything they could out of some different pieces that we had not seen this year.
Yes, they certainly did that. I thought it was really interesting and probably noticeable to most Red Raiders immediately, obviously, to see Kerwin Walton out there on the floor. What did you make of his day, and how do you think it came to be that he was the one that was called upon to pick up some slack?
Well, I think with Kerwin, in that if you need, like, I think they knew without Pop they were going to need scoring in general, against LSU, and I think he certainly can provide that. He always hasn't done it, obviously, and I think he just, if you're not going to ask him to be like a shutdown guy and ask him to like facilitate or to really to do much else other than score. Based on what I've seen, I'm just going off of that. Based on what we've seen this year, if you just need him to score and if you're going to get work to get him looks, a lot of times you're going to like the results, at least in the last several weeks. I mean, he's really got some confidence, and he doesn't need much time or space to get a shot off. But because, he's got a quick release, and man, they go in 5 of 6, and you needed it. And in some ways, he was kind of the player of the game, because I think your struggles since conference play has started has not been starting the game. It's not been really in the middle of the game. It's been finishing. And you go back to the Kansas, the Oklahoma, TCU, even Kansas State. You just can't. You can play teams tough. You can have a halftime lead. You can get to the game until about the last 5 to 10 minutes, but then you just can't. You can't sustain it. You can't finish it. And I thought against LSU, they started to take the lead, and you're kind of going back and forth right there. And it was Kerwin Walton that hit back-to-back threes a period of time, and I think that's what kind of held them off. And then I think that the wind kind of went out of their sails and everything. I think that's ultimately kind of what allowed you to win, as you kind of controlled it from then on until the finish. But again, if you're going to ask him to do a lot more than that, I just don't think you're going to like the results. He still makes some mistakes on defense. Even Mark Adams, just kind of coaching as hard as he could from the standpoint of down the stretch, he's substituting offense for defense. We're talking 5 or 6 minutes left. If there's a timeout or a dead ball, and depending on who had the ball, like certain guys are going in strictly because they're flawed one way or the other. They're a much better offensive player or a much better defensive player. And Jeff Haxton and I were talking on the broadcast. It's like you want to take some of these guys and put them together. But that's what flawed teams do. You want to mesh players together and combine skill sets so they can be two-way players, but those guys are hard to find.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I thought it was really interesting to see some of the buttons pushed and calls made by the coaching staff to try to get some things out of their roster, and what was an unusual day as far as some personnel that was available. Was glad to see Kerwin Walton have that success, and hopefully he can build off that to a degree. Well, what did you make of the reserves? Because there's always some interesting minute allotment and who's getting what looks. And I know that things, as we're just alluding to there, a little bit different on this day because of who wasn't available. But there were a couple of guys, at least unexpectedly, in my view, that were flashing a little bit off the bench.
Well, I think you nailed it in that Banner did what he needed to do. He scored a lot. I thought Davion Harmon had a much better game than we'd seen in recent memory because he was under control, and he really did a good job of sharing the ball and putting guys in spots to help guys like Kerwin Walton hit shots, and he had 8 assists in this game. But the unsung hero here was easily Elijah Fisher. 21 minutes off the bench, and I think he's one of those guys that is much more defensive oriented than he is offensive oriented, at least at this stage in his career at this level. And again, if you're going to ask him to score and try to do too much on offense, don't think you'll like the results. If you just need him to go out there and guard and kind of help share the ball a little bit and provide some toughness and some things like that. Again, the competition is going to get tougher, as we know, in the coming weeks in the Big 12 Conference, but I just thought he did a phenomenal job. He was a right place, right time guy a lot in this game. And I think, to be honest with you, he took a lot of Jalen Tyson's minutes at the end. I mean, we noted that on the broadcast. There's 3 minutes to go. I think Jalen Tyson took what I believe Coach Adams or somebody over there felt was an ill-advised shot off balance, and you didn't need to score at the time. Elijah Fisher came in and finished the game. And again, 9 rebounds. He did a lot of the dirty work. He had a couple of steals. He had a block shot. He had 9 rebounds. He had 5 points. He could have had more than that. There was a few putbacks that are just right there hanging on the rim. They don't fall in. But that was easily his best game as a Red Raider. So you mentioned that, squeezing some of this, these pieces that we just hadn't seen a lot. Easily Kerwin Walton's best game. Easily Elijah Fisher's best game. And to be honest with you, that's what it took to beat a pretty average SEC team. But you had to have a lot of what you had available produce, and they did.
Yeah, I was glad to see, as you mentioned, some of those regulars in O'Banner or Harmon. I was glad to see them have some good days. Harmon was 8-2 assist to turnover ratio, and O'Banner 3 for 6 from beyond the arc, an area that hasn't really been kind to him in Big 12 play. We'll see what happens as you return to conference action. You're talking about it gets tougher back in the Big 12 in weeks to come. And as we're having this conversation, we're talking basically in hours to come. It's going to get tougher in the Big 12 Conference because we're trying to figure out, Chris, as we now pivot to what is next for Mark Adams and the Red Raiders, trying to figure out how you can handle number 12 Iowa State. Coming to your building, they took you by 34 in theirs. So, Chris, where do we begin to come up with a recipe for, well, dare to dream about a win or something better than a 34-point loss. But first, today's episode brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. And if you're a business owner or hiring manager, you know that the key to success for your business is the team you surround yourself with. And LinkedIn Jobs is here to help you hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve success in 2023. LinkedIn Jobs, ready to help you attract those qualified candidates to your open jobs with simple targeting tools. They go beyond resume data by using insights from your job post, company, and their 875 million member profiles to put your post in front of just the right candidates. They make it easy to screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications, all on one simple-to-use platform. And that's why small businesses are rating LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. So get the help you need today in finding those qualified candidates you want to talk to faster by posting your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free today with LinkedIn Jobs. Terms and conditions apply. So, Chris, where do we begin to come up with a recipe for, well, dare to dream about a win or something better than a 34-point loss?
Yeah, and Iowa State is a team that, they had a huge win versus Kansas State last week at home, and that was a big game in the Big 12 standings. I didn't see their game over the weekend. They went to Columbia, Missouri, and got popped, lost by about 17 points. We're never in that game. Missouri is pretty good. I think they're like 16-5, something like that. And they kind of controlled that game from the get-go. I did notice that Caleb Grill, one of the starters for Iowa State, did not play. He barely played against Kansas State. He's had some back issues. We'll keep an eye on that. And then from your standpoint, is Pop or Fardaws available, or is neither? We need to keep an eye on that. But it's an Iowa State team that's right there at the top of the Big 12 standings, just right there hovering around, tied for second or first, whatever it is. But they're not going to overwhelm you offensively. Where they really get you is they're really good on defense. They kind of have taken the Mark Adams, part of it. Now, they looked really good on offense when they played you the first time. So and this is going back to the LSU game, Casey. This is what it's funny about basketball. When you shoot it well, it just makes everything better. It's like you're playing better. The coaching is better, it seems. The role players are better when shots go in because you made 11 threes against LSU.
Uniforms look better. I mean, hairdos look better.
Post-game meal,
the
the sun shining a bit brighter. I mean, I've said that before, but it's like when the shot goes up in the air, it's like good coach, bad coach. It's about to be determined here whether it goes in or not. Right. And again, all you can do as a coach is get guys good looks, draw up stuff, or emphasize certain things. And I just thought Davion Harmon did a really good job of that against LSU. He will need to do that again, tonight against Iowa State because they have a lot of the same principles that you have on defense. However, which is some of that side stuff, trying to keep you on the side. However, what they do employ a bit more is they'll trap you and they really try to speed you up. That's what makes me nervous for guys like Elijah Fisher or Kerwin Walton that aren't necessarily facilitators or anything like that. It's a tougher matchup. And again, I can't imagine Iowa State will come in a good mood, but maybe they're, every team goes through it. I noticed over the weekend, Mike Miles for TCU goes down. I think they're going to do an MRI on his knee. And, you hit the skids a little bit, you get an injury, and it you have momentum and it goes away. Then you have a hard time getting it back. Maybe that's what we get from Iowa State tonight. Maybe the Red Raiders have some confidence after finally winning one. But yeah, it won't be easy. Gabe Kalsher is obviously the main guy for Iowa State, and TJ Otzelberger does a good job coaching them in his second year. And that's kind of their identity, is kind of what you hope to be. They really try to beat you up defensively and force turnovers and then score that way, because they don't have a lot of explosive, super skilled draft pick type guys on their team. They don't, but they're really old, they're long, they're deep. And we'll see if Caleb Grill plays. And they're also missing a guy named Jazz Kuntz that has been missing the last 3 weeks or so, and he would be a rotation guy too. So I don't feel sorry for him. You've dealt with your own injury issues, but we'll kind of see what we get tonight because, I mean, if anything, the Red Raiders have played well in most games at home. They couldn't finish the last one. They couldn't finish Oklahoma, couldn't finish Kansas, but they've played well and been in these games. I don't think they played particularly well versus West Virginia outside of the first 5 to 7 minutes. It just was it was not their best effort for whatever reason, and West Virginia had a lot to do with that because West Virginia is now, again, prime example. Maybe you can pull this off. They get a little confidence, break their road losing streak in the Big 12, and they go back home and they beat a ranked Auburn team as part of this Big 12 SEC challenge. So they've got a little momentum now. And what's crazy about West Virginia, their net ranking or their KenPom is like in the top 30 in the country. So for as bad as we think they are or as low as they are in the Big 12 standings, the data nationally would suggest to you they're actually very, very good.
Is Coach Adams, as it relates back to the first matchup between Tech and Iowa State, obviously big margin, really tough loss on the road from Ames. I know you've got to point back to your previous experience, but is the margin or anything like that, is that a part of it? Is that something that's more so ignored? Do you move away from it? How do you think that part's handled?
Well, they will all unfortunately rewatch it, watch everything about, their inbound stuff, what they do out of timeouts. You have to. I just think it got away from you that night, like I hadn't seen in a while, and everything Iowa State threw up went in, right? So, and you just looked way out of sorts and just didn't really have many answers on that day. That was a tough one. I hadn't, I've gone to Lawrence a few times and it's been that way. And there's just some nights where it's just not, you just don't have it. But that was one of those that was like, because you had played everybody so close to that point. And then that night, it just, Gabe Coucher he just like everything he threw up went in. He was the best player on the floor easily that night. But they typically don't lean on too many threes. And I want to say in that game, they had 11, 12, 13 of them, I think. And you just, again, you hung around. So to answer your question, yeah, you look at it. I think you probably point to it and use it as motivation. We owe these guys kind of stuff. But you also don't, will Iowa State do the same things? Will they shoot it as well? Have you changed anything? What's your lineup look like? Because Pop played in that game up in Ames, and he may not play in Lubbock tonight. So, because it wasn't, but I don't know, 2.5 weeks ago. It feels like it wasn't too long ago that you were up there.
I just feel like with such a lopsided game, there can be kind of a fine line to walk as a coach where you're saying, hey, they beat us by 34. Let's get mad about it, or avoiding reminding them, boy, this team clobbered you guys. I don't even know. Do you want to show up and play this, or should we just wave the white? There's like, you don't want to hammer it too much, but you also want to use it as motivation if you can and learn whatever you can from the game. But I wondered, I'm glad you mentioned Isaacs. I was really just going to ask if there was any reason to bring up the name of Pop Isaacs or Fardaws Aimaq.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess my suspicion is neither one of them probably does play, but I don't know for sure. I think because when you see the replay of Pop's ankle, if it's just a normal ankle sprain, I think there's a chance he could be back. If it's a high ankle sprain, though, we're talking, and then you're talking to the severity of it. Is it bad or not bad or really bad, whatever? But I mean, those are a couple of 3 weeks sometimes. And for a basketball player, it's very difficult, especially the one that handles the ball like he does. So we'll see. And then Fardaws, I think. I don't think it's bad with him, but I think it's just a precautionary kind of trying to make sure that he's okay. So I really don't know either status. They just, because I'm just going off of the release. The release says they're both, have not been ruled out for the Iowa State game. So if you take that at face value, you could see one or both, or neither. I guess all the above. But yeah, I just know you need all the pieces available to them if they're healthy.
I was somewhat intrigued by the release. Was that unusual, or I just thought that was?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think coaches sometimes, because that's always the head coach's decision to kind of get out in front of it, or to have gamesmanship, or because and I think you have two head coaches right now that are fairly transparent with injury information, and there's plenty of people appreciate it, and other people kind of criticize it. It's just the way it goes. It's just kind of comes with being a coach. Because the one thing is, well, I mean, that's good to know. We want our players to understand there's no gamesmanship here. We're not, these guys are unavailable. Yeah. Or with kids out there in social media, I think sometimes, they may say on social media, so let's just get out in front of it. Or if they're not on the trip and they're seen in Lubbock, hey, let's just not act like they're here and going to play. Who knows the reasoning? I really don't know. But because Joey's pretty transparent with injury information a lot of the time, and Matt Wells actually was too. Matt Wells would actually start his press conferences with hey, here's who's available, here's who's not, and he would always say, hey, if somebody's going to be out long term, I'll tell you. If they're game to game, then I'm probably not going to really give away that. But basketball's a bit trickier. But yeah, I was not expecting that. I was actually in Baton Rouge with the team when that was sent out, and I knew that Pop or Fardaws weren't on the trip. They didn't get on the airplane or anything like that. But but LSU becomes aware of it too, and they could have taken up some time to prepare for that or not. But who knows? They weren't going to play. Yeah. It doesn't matter. And you still won. So
right. Oh, sure. I just thought it was interesting, and I wondered if I was just missing a lot of these in years gone by or situations gone by, because I didn't know of any compulsion there for Texas Tech to need to do it or have to do it or anything. So that I know of again. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting and wondered if there was any purpose to it, because it seems like very few to zero things are done without purpose as it relates to a college athletics department. And
I never asked Coach Adams about it. I mean, we didn't really talk about it after the game. We just kind of got into it with the guys that played, but those always come. The head coach decides what goes out, what doesn't, almost 99.9% of the time. And again, every coach feels differently. I'm sure he had his reasons, but hopefully we get another. And I'll say this: sometimes you do get it's funny we're mentioning Iowa State, because last season you got a release an hour before tip. Again, basically the team's about to come on the floor and people are going to start to see it up in Ames, mind you, but you were missing 4 to 6 players because they were, I guess, had tested positive for COVID. I think there was some issue. There was maybe an injury issue, but then you had some COVID stuff still going on, and they let everybody know that, but that wasn't until an hour before the game. So so it's not unprecedented, but again, it's always the head coach decides when and how and what gets sent out.
All right, looking forward to the matchup. You got a big-time home opportunity with a top 15 team coming to your crib. That's right, Big Monday.
That's right.
See if Texas Tech can pull off the improbable, and we'll rejoin you, of course, on the next episode to break it all down for better or worse.
Yeah, and I'll say this before we start talking about something other than basketball, and that I will miss that Big 12 SEC challenge. It was good to the Red Raiders. You 10 years, and then obviously over the weekend that's going to be the end of it. That was a 10-year run that will now stop. But you were 7-3 over that deal over those 10 years, and I think it allowed you to play some different teams that you wouldn't normally have. I think it was always good to you for the most part. I think you always, no matter who the coach was, took it very seriously, and you tried to build your resume. In this case, you were just trying to get a win. But because you don't get LSU in Lubbock if not for that. You don't get Auburn in Lubbock if not for that. Mississippi State a year ago if not for that. I mean, and on it goes. And and the Red Raiders have been to Columbia, South Carolina. They've been to Fayetteville. So it provided a lot of good basketball memories, and it was good to Texas Tech. I think, and as we mentioned last week, I think it'll. Not next year, but I think that the rumblings now are that it will be, Big 12, Big 10 more than likely. Maybe Fox has a lot to do with this from a TV network standpoint, but it'll be a year away. So, and I think it'll take place in December because this was the last of this, I think, setup too. I think even when the SEC and the ACC gets involved, it's going to be in early December and could be even spread out over a period of a week or 10 days or whatever it is. So anyway, I just wanted to get that in there because, again, we're not going to Baton Rouge to play football ever, and you're never more than likely going to go play them in baseball. And you wouldn't have gone to play them multiple times in basketball had it not been for this setup. I've been to Baton Rouge 3 times to play LSU with the Red Raiders from a basketball standpoint. So again, a lot of fun.
What a blessing for you to go to Baton Rouge so many times. And I think everyone should really pity those of us who have not experienced Baton Rouge, I guess. I'm sitting here thinking out of all things that, all opportunities it really provided you as a broadcaster or the players or whatever. The trip to Baton Rouge, most highly sought after by everyone.
Yeah.
Is there a casino in Baton Rouge?
There is. And it's right there on the Mississippi River because when we were leaving the arena over the weekend, notice this monster bridge. It's not Golden Gate-esque, but it is massive, this giant steel structure. And I'm thinking, what body of water is that? Well, it's the Mississippi River. And then, as soon as I finished that sentence, I look up, it's like Bell Casino or something. It's like one of those river boats right there. Yeah. So,
a river boat? Which you got experience on.
I do.
You've got some riverboat gambling experience, I think.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, we touched on this on a previous episode.
Yeah. it involved a lot of gin and tonics, and I've never had one since.
Gin popular.
That is all true story too. 100%. It was in Shreveport, Louisiana. But my Cajun, they like the riverboat casinos in Louisiana. Yes.
If you're going to be on a riverboat, you're going to be drinking gin. That's just always the way it's been. Unintentional rhyme master in the building. They go hand in hand. And when Snoop Dogg wrote his classic Gin and Juice, actually also on a riverboat. Most people don't know that, but a little historical tidbit there from your friends at Locked On Texas Tech. All right, we're back to wrap it up with a quick hitter because we could be sitting here finally as we have this conversation, Chris, on Big 12 football schedule eve, or possibly Big 12 football schedule eve, or possibly like a month away or a year. How many broken promises? How many broken promises can litter this pathway? It could actually happen. We believe it will this week. We're discussing it next on Locked On Texas Tech. Glad to have you along for the ride on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Subscribe on YouTube if you haven't so far so you never miss an episode. With Chris, I'm Casey, wrapping this bad boy up with what we think will be the final preview of the Big 12 football schedule release. Chris, we've circled around this drain a couple of times here. This is the most anticipated football schedule of all time. But into January, beginning of February has seemed like a pretty hard line to get this sucker out. So could it be coming Monday? Could it be coming Tuesday? Not sure yet exactly, but believing that we are within some proximity, right, finally, of that release.
Yeah, it'll either be later today or tomorrow for sure. And because I think that the league is contractually obligated with their TV partners to get it to them by February the 1st. And now I don't know what the cutoff date is on the time. I don't think they're going to push it until 11 o'clock Eastern or midnight or anything like that before it turns to February 1st or anything. So I think we're going to, because I don't think that there's really any change to it. So I don't really understand the holdup. That's what I'm. Once it does come out, there's a few questions that I have. Obviously, I want to know the Tech schedule, but I would love to know the context of the delay here and the why of the delay. And I'll be curious if we are made aware of that or not, because I just, as transparent as Brett Yormark has been, he's going to be asked about it. Somebody's going to write about this or want to write about it. And I think that is important to note, kind of what the dynamics in play here of why it took, because this has never happened. I know they're adding 4 new members, but why did it take so long? What was the hiccup? Because it's essentially going to come out. Because look, he told us, I'm going to go back to, what was it, mid-October, maybe early October. He was in Kansas City, Missouri, and he was at the Big 12 basketball kind of media day stuff. And he's asked a lot about a lot. And we even, I think, played some of that on this show. And I think at that point he said it'll be out in a few weeks or in early December. I can't remember the different time frame. But at some point that changed. Why? I think that'll be interesting for us to note on the why and the context there. And maybe it's minuscule. Maybe it doesn't really even matter in the big picture. But I do think, and if it doesn't, they should say that. But there's a reason that you're 6 weeks, 2 months later than you've always been with this release. But yeah, the TV networks want it because they want to start their drafting process of building what weekends in the fall are going to look like and in order and filling TV windows. And it's not just the Big 12. It's all the conferences, because I think you're the only one that has not released its schedule yet.
Do you have any idea what you would want it to look like for Texas Tech? If you could just draw up your most enjoyable Red Raider football schedule, who you missing, who you getting, whether it's current members, future members, have you really considered that just as a fan?
Yeah, I was going to ask you that same question because I'd be curious to see what your answer was there too. I don't think I'm going to get it because I kind of, unless I'm just really wrong, and I could be, I don't think you're going to get this, but I would love Texas to have to come back here one more time and really sign off on it saying, okay, this is it. I don't think you're going to, I think you're going to play them in Austin. I would always prefer a bye week, kind of nestled in the middle of your schedule. I think it's important to kind of play your schedule. Now, again, you could throw this what I'm saying out based on last year because TCU, they had their bye week early, and they played it straight through. Now, it ultimately cost them at the very end because once they got off of their weekly routine, that's when they started losing games. They lost 2 of their last 3. But I just think the bye week at the very beginning or at the very end is just a waste. I think it doesn't do anything for you. And I think coaches love to break their schedules up into kind of thirds or fourths. And like you kind of attack 2 or 3, 4 games in a row, and then you kind of, you set it up like that. I think internally I've seen that done by a variety of coaches. And so that's kind of what I'm looking at. Also, I'm curious, not just who you play or what I want, but I'll be curious to see if you get squeezed with an early conference game, if you end up being one of these Thursday night games, those are some of the things I'll certainly be looking for.
Yeah, I haven't really thought so much about the where. If I did get to thinking about the where I wanted it to happen, well, I'd like every game in Lubbock, Texas, America. But I've thought about who. I'm not, so jacked about getting on the schedule. I think you could miss me with Oklahoma and Iowa State and miss me with UCF and Cincinnati. I'm a big, not really regional, but state guy. I don't want to miss anybody in the state. I want to play all these suckers in the backyard, every one of them.
Yeah, including Houston, I'm assuming?
Including Houston.
Yeah.
They shouldn't even be here in the first place, but they are. Let's go smack them around and remind them where they come from. I just I don't want to miss anybody in the state. Those are the games I'm here for. That's what I'm traditionally most interested in. Oklahoma State, I guess, is sort of in that category as well, and that's one that obviously by now you'd imagine most Locked on Texas Tech viewers at least are anticipating maybe not being on the schedule, unfortunately, for the Red Raiders. But I'd like to see those that really, from an interest standpoint, regardless of what type of year you're having, what teams are you interested in playing? To me, that's those in the state of Texas. I'd love to have the challenge of a program like BYU. I mean, these are just other more interesting or compelling matchups to me. Oklahoma, I know, is a blue blood football program. They've just never – I'm just not interested, I guess, in what the Sooners have going on. They've never generated much heat as far as my fandom is concerned. I don't know why. But I think otherwise, Chris, it's just kind of about some of those more compelling localized matchups. And then, there are series that I do kind of enjoy otherwise, like the West Virginia series. I don't know why. I just like playing West Virginia. It seems like it's
because you beat them all the time.
Well, and it's kind of like a fist fight. Happiness before kickoff. And it's just their fans care. I know that, so I don't know. I think just if I had my druthers, and I love having those druthers, don't we all? I'd really like to see you not miss any of what's in the state. And I guess you could add Oklahoma State to that list as well regionally. But kind of seems like we ought to expect to at least miss some of that, including those Cowboys.
Yeah, we'll see what we get. I will say this: I won't ever miss going to Norman again. That rarely, if ever, went well, except for one night in particular, where there was the delayed kickoff and all that.
Right.
But other than that, I saw that movie plenty of times. It was not very fun. But yeah, no, I'm with you. All the in-state programs will seem like a must, but Oklahoma State is also seemingly in that category. It's a very easy trip. They're always competitive. And I think they were in line to come to Lubbock next year too, that's a kind of a premium home game that you won't get. You maybe going to replace them with maybe a Central Florida, if anything. So
what a world!
Yeah, I know. Yeah, go figure. Yeah, so Gus Malzahn, if that game's in Lubbock, yeah, the Gus bus will be bringing his Golden Knights into Lubbock, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm sure next time around with the Cowboys, we'll be going to Stillwater when we get the series back up and revitalized, just about how that'll work out. But we'll see when we finally get this sucker on the ground. We'll be back to process what lies ahead for Joey McGuire and the Red Raiders in 2023 right here on Locked On Texas Tech. Thanks again for making it your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Subscribe on YouTube so you never miss an episode. And we hope that you'll make Locked On College Basketball your second listen each day. Right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, it's your one-stop shop for all things college hoops. That's Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Chris, got another big opportunity coming up from United Supermarkets Arena, man. So enjoy the game, and maybe we could talk about something improbable on the other side as some things break the way of the good guys.
I hope so, man. Keep hope alive. If you go to the game tonight, I'll see you at the arena, and we'll see what we get.
There we go. We're back to chop it up with you either way. On the other side, for Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Thanks for joining us once again on Locked On Texas Tech.